Welcome to the Kitty Cat Go Adventure podcast, where we discuss various topics related to cat adventure, travel, training, and enrichment. I'm your host, Emily Hall, cat trainer and cat adventure enthusiast. Join me as I share my own tips and advice and chat with the experts to help and encourage you to give your cat the best life possible. Remember, no adventure is too big or too small. I can't wait to learn, grow, and explore with you. Ever considered traveling with your cat overseas or to a foreign country? The idea of traveling within your own country can be overwhelming enough, let alone traveling internationally. There are all the laws and regulations to consider, which aren't always easy to navigate. And then there's the struggle of finding cat-friendly accommodations. While all this may sound like the makings for an impossible adventure, today's guest, Sonja Grassmugg, is here to tell you that it is possible and it can be an amazing experience despite the difficulties. Sonja and her cat Percy are a world-traveling duo. Residing in Massachusetts, they began their cross-country travels during the summer of 2021 when they visited Illinois, New Mexico, and Georgia. Then last summer, Sonja had to cross the Atlantic to complete a PhD research year abroad, and of course, Percy joined her. They have now been to 6 countries together, flown 9 times, and traveled by train, ferry, car, and pet taxi. Though not always the easiest cat to travel with, Sonja says Percy recovers quickly and adapts well to new environments. She believes one of her biggest assets when traveling with Percy is having educated herself in depth about cat behavior, positive reinforcement training, and techniques that help with desensitization and reactivity management. Let's go ahead and dive in. Hi, Sonja.
Hello.
Why don't you kick us off by telling us more about yourself and Percy?
Hi. So, I'm actually a history PhD student, which has not that much to do with cats. But in October 2020, I adopted this little one when he was 3 months old. And since that, he's kind of taken over my life, and I also really got into everything, like learning more about cats, about, generally animal behavior, training, whatever. And being a PhD student, my life is not very settled. Also, I'm not actually originally from the US, and partially because of that, partially because of my research, I have to travel a lot. I always knew I needed to do this. And I knew Percy would need to come with me one way or another because, I don't really have anyone to look after him. And also, he's my fur child and emotional support animal and everything. But my priority is, of course, always to make sure to make the travel as easy for him as it's possible for me to make it for him, and hopefully also get him to have as much enjoyment along the way as it's possible. Sometimes that works, sometimes a bit less.
Well, I think anyone who adventures with their cat in any form or fashion knows that sometimes things don't go the way that they're supposed to.
Yeah.
That's part of the fun, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and you learn all the time.
Yes, always learning for sure. So I mentioned in your bio that you guys have done a lot of international travel. You've flown from the US over to Europe and traveled a lot across Europe to 6 different countries. So can you tell us a little bit about the types of international travel you guys have done, the places you've been?
Yes. So, our actual destination was simply the UK and Ireland. But getting from the US or anywhere else directly to the UK or Ireland with a pet is not really that straightforward, because specifically the UK and Ireland, they have certain restrictions in there, which is why I knew I needed to travel via Europe anyway. Also, I have family in Austria, which is also one of the reasons why I thought, okay, we'll first go there, visit the family for a bit, and then travel through Europe and make our way from there to the UK. So we took a flight with Condor and Lufthansa. Condor is like a sub-airline group of Lufthansa or something, so both German ones. From Boston to Frankfurt, and from there connecting flight to Vienna. So this was the first very big stage. Then we had 2 weeks in various parts of Austria, visiting family and so on. And then we eventually took a flight, well, actually from Slovenia, because it so happened that this was where the nearest, most convenient airport was, to Belgium, spent one night in a hotel in Belgium, and then made our way by 3 different trains from Brussels to Calais at the coast of France. Then spent 3 nights in a really nice, quiet Airbnb there to, give both of us a bit of a breather.
Yeah.
And from there, we then took a pre-booked pet taxi that took us onto it's called the shuttle train that goes through the Channel Tunnel into the UK. So,
That's quite the journey.
yes. And then, well, just to quickly go through the whole journey. So, and then we were in London for 4 months, and then I got a car, and then we were driving through England and Wales over a couple of stages, and then eventually took a ferry to Ireland, traveled through Ireland, and we lived in Ireland for 7 months in a cottage and then somewhere else. And then recently, over the last couple of months, we kind of made the way back into the UK. And in the end, a flight out of the UK via Frankfurt back to Boston. So this is the journey, and I'll go into more details soon about how and why.
Yeah, that's really complicated. Golly, definitely an adventure, and a big one at that. I know travel is a lot when you're having to travel just by yourself as a person, having to do all of that, navigate all of that, also with a cat. Yeah.
Being a solo person traveling with a cat, I feel like it must be so much easier having a second person there to, just so that you can sometimes just take a break, or even at the airport, just like have someone else look after the cat, and you just go off, use the restroom or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. You can't even go use the restroom without Percy. You've gotta bring him to the bathroom with you. Yeah, all those little things that you might not think about, until you're there. Well, we are definitely going to dive into all of the hows and whys of the international part, but let's start domestically. You guys have also done a lot of travel within the United States, flying, driving. Let's start with the basic requirements for flying with a cat just within the United States.
Yes. So, I mean, the basic ones, they're the same as also the international basic kind of requirements. So, your cat has to be in a carrier of a certain size, although, I mean, actually, the size regulations, I realize it doesn't really make a lot of sense the way they describe it online. It's like, oh, it has to be only like, I don't know, up to 9 inches tall or whatever, but your animal has to be able to comfortably stand up and turn around and then have weird diagrams of like completely unrealistic looking animals in there.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, basically, you will be traveling with a soft carrier, and generally, I find as long as you can sort of squeeze the sides a little bit
Yeah.
and can demonstrate that you can fit it within the required space,
Mhm.
you should be fine. Um, and so the rules are usually always, so the cat has to stay in the carrier the whole time, actually also all the way on the airport, throughout the flight, and under the seat in front of you. I mean, that's the rules. In the US, I found those rules aren't being mostly not enforced that strictly.
Yeah.
So I mostly let Percy out at the airport, like at the gate or something, where we
Mhm.
find like a nice quiet corner just to let him stretch his legs a little bit. And obviously take him to, either big unisex toilet or baby changing room, or like accessible toilet or something like that, where you have like your own big cubicle basically, and set up his potty for him, and hopefully he can use that. Uh, and then in the plane, I mean, Percy really, I don't know, he sometimes cries a lot when he has to be like under the seat in front of me. He's sometimes a bit calmer if I have the carry on my lap. And
Mhm.
occasionally I also kind of opened it a bit when he was quiet, give him a treat and stuff. And I actually found like in the US, so I mean maybe I was lucky, but no one ever told me off. uh
Yeah, I've
that's
found that to be true because I've flown with Kylo a couple of times, and on one flight, they were super lax. Like, I had his carrier in the seat beside me for the whole trip. Luckily, I had a row to myself, and that probably has something to do with it, like how full the flight is. But
Mhm.
my first flight was fairly empty. I had a row to myself, so I just kept Kylo's carrier on the seat beside me, and no one said anything to me. I was able, open it a little bit, like you said, give him some pets and treats, and some of the flight attendants noticed him and they wanted to pet him and say hello too, and it was great. But then on my second flight, I did the same thing and they told me no, that he had to go under the seat. So,
Yeah.
I think it just depends on the flight attendants you have, maybe the airport that you're at, even the airline probably, and how strictly they enforce their rules.
And my senses in Europe, they're a bit more strict. Probably especially the German airlines. I don't know if that was a coincidence or, playing to the stereotype. They seem to be a stickler for rules. So like
Yeah.
Lufthansa and associated flights. So just so you know, they are more strict in that.
Is
But
there any paperwork that's required to fly
uh,
with a cat within the country?
within the country, um, I think mostly they don't even check, but in general, I think it's certainly recommended that you have like just a vet's health certificate or
Mhm.
something. It's always good to have it. And, anyway, it's good to just go to the vet before a flight and also talk to them about things like, getting some kind of calming medication like gabapentin and so on. And also specifically talk to them about the dosage, because that's something that initially no one told me.
Mhm.
I know it was just like, yeah, I have some still at home. Can I give it to him? And they're like, yeah, sure. And it's like 50 milligrams, and it didn't do much for Percy because he's a big cat. And I mean, most recently I talked to a vet and they were like, oh, I can give him easily like 200 milligrams.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, talk to your vet about that and how much, should be kind of adequate for your cat. And every cat will react to it differently. Also, I would advise, be that gabapentin or any other kind of calming supplements or anything, try it out before.
Mm,
Don't give it to your cat the first time when you're flying.
yeah.
Test it at home, see how it affects your cat, and make sure your cat doesn't have any adverse reactions to it or anything like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. You don't want allergic reaction or just, any if you give them too big of a dose and then they're like, conked out.
Yeah, which has never happened to Percy. Um, I don't know, he's pretty robust.
Yeah.
So just generally one tip, I would say pro tip for flying with a cat, beyond all of the very good information that people can find, on your Kitty Cat Go website, and so uh, is fly like take into the cabin, take two carriers. So one carrier, obviously your cat will be in there. Take a second carrier and So basically, with most flights, especially in the US, you're allowed to, like, if you're having a cat, you're not allowed to have like a carry-on, but you're allowed to have like a personal item,
Mhm.
which is some kind of, bag of whatever size. You know, take like a bag, like a large handbag or something, then put it inside the other carrier, and then carry the carrier as your bag, your personal item. This way, you have an emergency carrier with you. I do this every time. And on our very last flight on the way back to the US, I that really, yeah, that really was our lifesaver, because
Oh.
if an accident happens, if your cat pees in the carrier or worse, imagine you're at the beginning of a flight, imagine it's a long flight or you have a connecting flight. What do? You're stuck with it. So having this second emergency carrier with you in cabin, it can be a lifesaver, because you can transfer your cat and then try to clean the other carrier if you can, but also take with you something like, the like large waterproof, like compression bags, like the kind of stuff you take when you go hiking, so your
Mhm.
stuff doesn't get wet or something. Take like at least one of those large ones with you, so you can put the dirty carrier inside that.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
also make sure you have enough other bags or whatever to then carry your stuff.
yeah, yeah. Good stuff I wouldn't have thought about.
And pet wipes. Of course, you can also, put puppy pads and whatever in the carrier, but if your cat's anything like Percy and has like tantrums in the carrier and just rolls around, they're not going to stay in place and
Yeah,
need help.
yeah.
Uh, so yeah, this is my pro tip: trouble with carriers. And so far, uh, taking that second carrier as a personal item thing has never been a problem. So
Cool.
it
Well,
looks
yeah.
interesting because everyone thinks you're traveling with two cats. Yeah.
Well, that's a great tip. And thanks for sharing that, because that's one of those things that most people probably wouldn't think about until something bad happens and you learn that lesson the hard way. So don't learn this lesson the hard way, listeners. Learn from Sonja's tips.
Yeah. I fortunately I've been doing this before something bad happened, so
Yeah, that's good.
I had
You were prepared.
the foresight in this case. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So we just went over the basic requirements for
Mhm.
domestic travel within the United States. Internationally, if you're flying with a cat, I imagine all those same things apply. There's just some additional things. So what are the additional requirements, and how is flying internationally different than flying within the United States?
Yes. So the most fundamental thing that's different is in terms of the, getting like the health certification and everything. So it depends where you're flying to. So you need to find out what the sort of entry requirements for pets are in your destination country. Or, I mean, if you're going to the EU, they have all the same rules there. UK is a little bit different, but it's fairly similar. Um, and then, so usually you will always need, well, first of all, your cat needs to be microchipped. If your cat isn't already microchipped, get that done as soon as possible, because you then have to get a rabies vaccine, I think, only like a certain time after the microchipping or something like that.
Hmm,
I don't know. There's this very specific timeline. And if you had it like before the microchipping, it doesn't count or something like that.
weird.
Yes, I don't know what the reasoning behind that is, but yeah, basically make sure you got the basic things that you should be having anyway. Have your cat microchipped and uh, a still valid rabies vaccination. Beyond that, you will then need to make an appointment with your vet. Get usually something like a health certificate, and in many cases, and I think sometimes that's like the requirements of the airlines, not always of the country, and it can vary, but like sometimes this shouldn't be older than like 10 days.
Hmm.
So you should plan it in a way that it happens shortly before the flight. Now, where it gets really complicated is, especially for a lot of international flights, you have to get this health certificate from a specific vet that's like, I think, a federally certified vet or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And then you have, once they sign that, it then has to be mailed, physically mailed to the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, and they have to, I think, I don't know, approve it or validate the signature or something like that. Basically, put their stamp on it and mail it back to you. And you obviously need to get it back before you travel.
So all of
So,
this has to happen within 10 days.
well, so I'm still not quite sure. This is what I initially thought. And I basically ended up paying, I think, an extra $50 or whatever for, like, express mail to get it to them. And then also, because you need to send them an envelope to get it returned. Honestly, I'm a little confused. I tried to actually look this all up again online before our meeting today. I looked at the website and ended up more confused than before. So I just looked at, like, the governmental guidelines and what it says there. So basically, I would say my tip is, once you know you're gonna travel internationally with your cat and where you're going and when you're going, contact your vet, tell them about it, and they will then be able to tell you, first of all, is either your vet or another vet in that same practice certified to give you, the specific health certificate that you need.
Mhm.
And then hopefully they will also be able to advise you about the timeline when you should be coming in and making sure you have enough time to send that form and get it back and all of it.
Wow.
It's weirdly complicated. So
Yeah.
just be aware of it, plan ahead. And yeah.
Yeah, I imagine your cat has to be up to date on all the vaccinations too, right?
Yes. I mean, I can't tell you now by heart what exactly the things are that I need, and it maybe it's kind of country specific as well. But again, just as soon as you know you're going to be traveling, contact your vet, and they should be able to tell you that. And if they can't tell you that directly, they should be able to refer you to someone else, or like a website or something where it tells you exactly what you need.
What about flying with cats in cabin versus as cargo? I know that's a big topic for international travel. People don't wanna have to put their pets in cargo.
Yes. So they're actually, when you talk about like cargo, they're actually two different things. So one is actually, I think, like actually in like the luggage compartment or something like that,
Yeah.
which is definitely something I think I would never ever recommend. I think that could be actually dangerous. And not all airlines allow that anyway, especially not traveling transatlantically. Traveling via cargo is different. So with that, well, I mean, I only really looked at that in terms of getting to the UK, and I'm not sure in how far this is different if you were to plan to do this to get you to different places. But usually you do this via a special pet shipping company. So they kind of take care of everything. And I mean, the one good thing is they then also tell you exactly about the whole process with like the vet and
Yeah.
certificates and everything you need to do. And they will actually, I think, also look after your animal definitely before and after the flight, maybe even during the flight. I'm not quite sure, but it's something that's like a lot safer and taking animal welfare into consideration. Problem with that is it can be absolutely hideously expensive,
I would
which is I
imagine.
didn't do it. So I only checked this out once in summer 2021. I looked at how much it would be to get Percy from Boston to London on a direct flight via cargo. And yeah, I contacted a couple of pet shipping companies, and there was one I talked to on the phone, and she was like, "Yeah, in total, it's going to be something like $3,000."
Oh my gosh.
I know, yes. I mean, even the person who I talked to was like, "Yeah, it's absolutely hideous," but it's because of, I don't know, specifically also like because of the weird UK regulations, and I'm not sure how much the whole COVID situation played into that as well. So maybe it would be cheaper, but still, expected to cost quite a bit.
Yeah,
Much more expensive than like taking your pet in cabin. And then the other issues with that is, I think especially flights going out of the UK, they have like very strict regulations about temperature. So if the temperature on the day of the flight is above a certain temperature, I don't know where the cutoff point is. If it's above that, they say no, the pet cannot fly. So you might end up flying out, but your pet stays behind. And I'm not quite sure what
Mm.
happens then, but I guess they probably have to board the pet and you probably have to pay extra until they can ship it, not to mention how horrible that would be for your
Yeah.
cat. So
Golly.
that is, especially if you're traveling in summer, that's the kind of danger with that as well.
Is that the only option for flying to the UK is with the pet shipping company?
If you want to fly to the UK directly, yes. So the UK has different rules to Europe. So to Europe, you can definitely, there are a number of airlines that allow you to take your pet in cabin.
Mm.
Um, but the UK and Ireland both have those weird rules where they say you're not allowed to take your pet into the country in cabin. Yeah, only via cargo and via like a pet shipping company. And then also weirdly, if you do this, you have to pay like customs for your pet in the UK, even though if you're taking your pet into the UK through another way, you don't have to pay customs. It's not making sense, but that's another like a few $100 or something. So just be aware.
Golly.
Yes, so this is why if you want to take your pet to the UK or Ireland, I recommend fly to Europe and then make your way from there. The next problem is once you are, let's say, if you want to fly to France or Belgium or something, and then okay, just take like there's this nice train, the Eurostar that goes directly, from Paris to London. Great. Guess what? That train does not allow pets at all. The
Mm.
only pets allowed on there are, certified service
Service
animals.
animals.
Yeah. So sadly, that's not an option, which means the only options are to either take the shuttle train that also goes through the Channel Tunnel, but you need a car to get onto that shuttle train. And the other one is taking a ferry. But last time I checked, you also needed a car to get onto the ferry if you want to take a pet as well onto the ferry. So the option I took is you book a pet taxi. So there are very specific services called pet taxis. There are a number of different companies that do that. They pick you up from various places within Europe. You can even do like a really long journey. It will just cost you a lot. And then they just drive you and your cat and your luggage, all the way to the UK via the shuttle train, and then drive you wherever you want to in the UK. Of course, the longer the journey, the more expensive. But the shortest you can do is just take it from like Calais to Folkestone as well. The shuttle train ends. So
It's
or maybe
basically like a cross-country Uber service for pets.
yes, kind of. But I have to say, even though this wasn't cheap, and you definitely have to book it at least a couple of weeks in advance, I had a really good experience with this. So this was literally the smoothest part of our journey. We
Mm.
had a really nice, super nice, relaxed driver and got us from Calais all the way to London really well.
How long of a drive was that?
Can't remember. Maybe like 3 hours more. I mean,
Oh,
not
okay.
even
So
that
it's
much.
not
I mean,
it's not
if you're from the
terrible.
US and used to driving distances there, it's not too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a few hours, that's not bad. I don't have any frame of reference for Europe. I've never been there. So, like,
Yeah.
with I can travel 4 or 5 hours just within my own state.
No, no. Once you're in Europe, distances are very different.
Yeah, okay.
Uh, and also most other public transport in Europe and the UK are actually very pet friendly. So
Oh,
you
that's
can take
good.
your pet usually in a carrier. Definitely on trains, as long as it's not the Eurostar. Uh, not all long distance buses. I think I found in Europe there were some long distance buses that didn't allow pets. But yeah, for example, from Brussels, there would have been the Eurostar going directly from there to Calais. But we couldn't take that, so we had to change twice.
So
Of
just
course, we could also rent a car, but
yeah,
yeah, that wasn't possible for me at this point. But yeah, long story.
But okay, so that brings me to a question. If I'm from the United States, my driver's license is United States driver's license. Can I rent a car and drive in Europe?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
Definitely before you go to get was it an international license or something? I mean, it's literally just like a little booklet that like translates the terms of your license. It's nothing more. You can get it through, I think, the AA or something. Yeah, it's easy to get, and not all countries require it, but some do. So just take it. And then yes, you can definitely rent a car, but again, be aware once you're in the UK and Ireland, they drive on the other side.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. If you want to like rent a car in Europe and just drive to the UK, then you're stuck there with a car where the wheel is on the wrong side.
Yeah. Okay, so let me recap the crazy journey you and Percy had up until this point. So you flew from the United States to Europe, not directly to the UK because you'd have to hire an expensive, ridiculous pet shipping company. So you flew with him in cabin to Europe, then got picked up by a pet taxi service that then drove you to the UK.
Yes, that's
Okay.
a short version. Of course, in Europe, the different journeys here and there. And I mean, because I did like the detour via Austria as well, but I guess the shortest would be to fly to like Paris, and then you just need to make a way still like from Paris to Calais, or you could be picked up by a pet taxi from Paris. Yeah, depending on your budget and yeah.
Do you know if there are any other options besides flying to get to Europe from the United States? Are there like boats?
I think unless you have your own private boat or yacht or something, no. I actually looked into this. I even looked into like, you can sometimes get onto like cargo ships and stuff like that. And it's like, no pets allowed, cruises, no pets allowed, all of that stuff. So yeah.
So flying is it.
Yeah. Seems flying is sadly the only option, and it's not a great one.
Yeah, well, I bet riding by boat wouldn't be great either. I mean, I don't
Depends.
know. It would take forever, it seems.
Yeah.
Once you're in Europe, is traveling between countries pretty easy? I mean, I know you have to either rent a car or have a pet taxi, but like getting from one country to the next, do they each have different regulations? Like you have to have this paperwork to cross this border or, anything like that? Are you a cat adventurer looking for ways to strengthen that bond between you and your cat? New cat enrichment ideas? And encouragement and inspiration to explore the world together? Bond with your cat like never before by joining Kitty Cat Go Trailblazers, a community of cats and humans from all over the world who are ready and waiting to support and encourage you on your cat adventure journey. Over in Trailblazers, you'll find monthly challenges and activities designed to give you fresh ideas of things to do and new ways to explore with your cat, both indoors and outdoors. You'll also be able to connect face-to-face with other community members during our monthly Zoom chats. Trailblazers is made up of cat adventurers of all experience levels who are all ready to share in your victories and struggles and to help you and your cat reach your goals. You'll find yourself right at home amongst your tribe. Learn more at kittycatgo.com/trailblazers. Once you're in Europe, is traveling between countries pretty easy? I mean, I know you have to either rent a car or have a pet taxi, but like getting from one country to the next, do they each have different regulations? Like you have to have this paperwork to cross this border or, anything like that?
No. So the good thing in Europe is, especially any countries that are part of the EU, and especially the so-called Schengen zone, is, yeah, it's pretty much the same regulations everywhere, and you don't need. So in terms of your cats, the kind of documents you need, it's all the same thing. The only thing is, if you're gonna spend more time there, you need to think. So this certificate you get from the US, it expires at some point. I'm not quite sure now how long that takes. Maybe it's 30 days or something, or I don't know. But, it's not going to be valid forever.
Mm-hmm.
So if, let's say, you're going to be spending more time in Europe, it's worth trying to get a European pet passport. This
Oh.
is very good, even if you're going to the UK. So yeah, in the UK, Europe has this great thing. It's the same in every country there, where it's basically like a health certificate where you then also have like noted down all of the vaccinations and stuff your pet got. And this is valid for, I don't know for how long, but a long time.
Like years, a long time?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
okay.
can't remember if it's like 3 years or just doesn't even have an expiry date or something, but
Mm-hmm.
you're good with this for a while. So you need to go to a vet in Europe, and I think probably most vets there can give you one of these. The only thing is, so as I only found out when I was there, is they ask you for your address in that country. Now, in my case, I got it in Austria, and I was able to give them my mom's address. Now, I don't know how strict they are about it. If, let's say, you're just in like a guest accommodation for a couple of weeks there or something, if you could
Yeah.
step down, or a friend's address or something, I'm not sure, but it's definitely worth inquiring.
Mm-hmm. So
And
you can't get the pet passport in the United States before
no,
you go. This is something you get
this
once
is
you're
something
already
you can
there.
only get in Europe. And
Okay.
another thing is, so it notes down, like they will note down like the rabies vaccination, but they're not allowed to note down rabies vaccinations that have been done outside of Europe. So even if your cat got a rabies vaccination just before you traveled, in order to have a valid rabies vaccination in that passport, they just need to quickly give your cat a new one, which is what they did with Percy.
Interesting.
It wasn't too
Okay.
bad, but yeah.
Yeah.
Really good to have, though, because even if you're like traveling to the UK, so the UK keeps changing the rules at the moment a lot since Brexit. They don't know quite where they are with everything. But so this isn't no longer like a UK thing, but it gets you into the UK. It counts as like a health certificate, like the kind of thing you need to get into the UK as well. And then also, otherwise, if you're going into the UK, again, you could get like a health certificate there to then travel to Europe or something like that. But this is, again, something that has like a fairly tight expiry date. If you're able to get that, it's good just for the long term. It's going to help you.
Yeah. Yeah. If you didn't have that, how would it work?
You would have to find out when the latest health certificate expires, and then, get a new one wherever you are.
Okay. Yeah.
And again, this would probably be a temporary thing you would be getting.
Yeah.
So it likely just means more necessary vet visits along the way.
If you were maybe just going to visit one country in Europe and maybe only be there for a couple of weeks, then the
Oh,
pet passport thing you might not need. The pet passport is good for if you're doing a lot of like inter-country travel for an extended period of time.
yes, exactly. Yeah. If
Gotcha.
it's just a short journey, you won't need it. But also, if you think, oh, you might be returning to the EU at some point, that might be a good thing to have.
Yeah. So we've covered all of the information for getting to Europe, UK, and all of that. Now, once you're there, what is finding accommodations like that are cat friendly? Because I know even within the United States, a lot of times Airbnbs, hotels, things like that are sometimes they say pet friendly, but they really mean dog friendly and they don't allow cats. Did you run into those same issues? How did you navigate all of that?
I would say overall, my experience there was fairly similar to how it was in the US. So, obviously, once you put in the pet friendly filter in Airbnb or wherever, or you're traveling with a pet, of course, your choice will be reduced by like 90%. And you're left with accommodation where even the cheapest options are going to be a lot more expensive than what you might usually be looking at. But there are options. And I mean, I find with Airbnb, be that in Europe or in the US, even if it says pet friendly, always read through everything you find. Like sometimes it's in the description that it says something about, dogs, not cats or whatever. Sometimes it's at the very bottom when it tells you the, I don't know, house rules or some other things. Just really thoroughly look through that whole website. Sometimes you find information there. I mean, personally, I also find if they say something like, oh, just like your pet is not allowed on any of the furnishings or something, I'm like, no, this isn't gonna work.
Yeah, how do you regulate that with a cat?
They're probably thinking of dogs, but still, I was like, unless this is my only option, well,
Yeah.
it's probably not the best. And then, so what I always do is on Airbnb, you can go and click on reserve. And I mean, sometimes you're just reserving it, sometimes you're actually booking it. But as soon as you've done that, you have the option to send your host a message. You can even do it before, but I like to do it after just to get the reservation in there. And they can always cancel it afterwards. And in that, I just, mention, hi, I'm just going to let you know I'm traveling with my cat. And I usually have this like pre-written thing where I'm like, my cat Percy, and he's like really well trained and well traveled, and we've been staying in lots of Airbnbs, and it's been going well, whatever. And then I referred him to like my Airbnb reviews because I have quite a lot of really nice reviews that say, I've been there with my cat and left everything really neat and tidy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's never been a problem. So everyone was always like, yeah, sure, your cat is very welcome.
That's good to know. I've always been curious, like what the culture is like in other countries, as far as cat-friendly accommodations, if maybe they were more cat-friendly than they are here or less, so it's pretty much the same.
Pretty much the same with, you get a bit of both.
Yeah.
But the places I always ended up with, I mean, I literally spent hours looking for the perfect accommodation. But what I always end up finding is usually really good. And oh yeah, so one thing with Percy, if possible, I like to get like a self-contained accommodation. You actually have your own house or annex or condo or whatever. There are, of course, also accommodations that are, we just get a room in someone else's house and it's still pet friendly, but I mean, that's often cheaper. But, think about it. Like, is this going to work for your pet? Like, is your pet going to be okay to stay in that one room for a while, depending on how long you need to stay there? Or can also ask the owner, would it be okay for the pet to run through the whole house? But then again, what if the owner tends to like leave the windows or the porch door opens? And having screened windows is not as common in Europe as it's in America. So just be aware that might be an issue. Also, a lot of pet-friendly accommodations have already pets in the house. So those are just things to consider. Like, how do you think this is going to work for you, for your cat? What would your cat be comfortable in? How well behaved is your cat? And all of this. So yeah, just something to think of when thinking of what type of accommodation to book.
Yeah. So once you've found the place to stay, you're there, you're setting up your space for Percy. What kinds of things have you packed for him? What are the basic travel necessities for international travel? I mean, I know obviously you're going to need food and water bowls and beds, toys, litter, scratchers, like the basics. Is there any additional thing that you always bring or recommend bringing for international travel or extended stays?
I mean, mostly it's pretty much the same as I would pack for travel within the US. So, all of the staples that you need. They're going to help to make your cat feel comfortable. Now, one thing that's just generally helpful is if your cat is, used to a variety and change. Like, for example, if you're suddenly in a different country, the litter you were able to get there might be different. That's not a problem with Percy, but I know other pets might be picky about that. Food, definitely. There's a lot of food that, you can't get in Europe. And I mean, I really noticed the kind of pet food on offer, especially healthy cat food on offer in the UK, in the US is so much better than what you can get in most places in Europe. Like in all of the UK and Ireland, I could not find any freeze-dried raw cat food. It just doesn't exist there yet.
That's so interesting because I always think of Europe and the UK as being like ahead of the US as far as health things and food regulations, like because they don't allow a lot of the unhealthy things that the US does. So I would think their pet food would be the same, that it'd be healthier and better there.
No, in that, no, not at least not in with cat food. I'm not sure about dog food. I feel like the UK seems to be generally a lot more dog friendly in many ways. But no, with cat food, they're definitely still behind, especially Ireland. And then also just trying to find like the healthier pet food options. It's also really expensive. So just be aware. And again, with Percy, it's good. I always fed him like a variety of diets. So he's pretty good with new foods. Of course, he has like preferences, but it's easy to introduce him to new things. So, if you will be traveling with your cat at some point, trying to get your cat used to a greater variety is good because, otherwise you may have a problem. Or if you're just traveling for a short time, maybe you're able to pack enough in your luggage, depending on what type of food it is.
Yeah, I know that's tough. Like the times that I've flown with Kylo, thankfully it was only for like I think a week trip was the most that we took when we flew. And I was able to check a bag, and so I, packed plenty of food and even litter and everything. So I didn't have to get anything once I got to where we were going. But, traveling internationally and especially if you're going for a longer trip, I mean, packing a lot of cat food, especially if your cat eats like canned food, I mean, that gets heavy. That's going to eat up your weight restriction limit really quickly.
That's why freeze-dried food is the best for traveling.
Yeah.
I love it. And that's why it's just like so devastating not to find it anywhere in the UK.
Well,
I found good alternatives eventually, but you have to look, and also look online. There's some things you can order online, sometimes from like different parts of the EU and so on, that you can get it shipped in for reasonable prices. So in terms of other sort of important things to take along, so for me, it's important also, so I like Percy to have like a GPS tracker or even a GPS and a radio tracker. And one thing to consider is, so there are some brands of GPS trackers, like we had initially the Geobit in the US. Turns out it doesn't work outside the US. At least it didn't back then. I don't know if things changed by now. But make sure your GPS tracker is, it works globally. So we now have it's called Attractive, which I'm really happy with. And that works globally, so it's great for travel. And I was also able to have it, on the airport, on him, and so on. And maybe even also have like the TapCat radio tracker. It's this really small one. I actually made Percy my own harness where I can actually attach both trackers in a comfortable way. So it's good to have that. And also with the GPS trackers, just be aware they only work, so they can only send signals to your phone if you're in a place with cell reception. So that's one big drawback, and why it's good to have also the backup radio tracker for places like this. But then also you have to consider, if you're traveling, for example, from the US to Europe, you may get there and not have a cell phone yet.
Oh, yeah.
You need to get a new one. Or think about your tag. What if you have like a tag and it has your phone number on it? But if it's got your American phone number on it, is this going to be useful in Europe? So what instead of the tag, what I always had on Percy, it's like get those little thingies. Um, you can
Oh.
open
Oh, and you can fit like a rolled up paper in there?
exactly, and it's this big roll of paper, and I mean you can get a whole bag of these and prepare a few, and then you get. Yeah, this is like a new one, so you can put on like your name. I mean, address may not be helpful, but your phone number or two different phone numbers. Or I like to put my email address because
Yeah.
I know I'm going to be able to, reach that. Usually on the
Yeah.
back, I also write out like Percy's microchip number, just
Mm,
in case.
yeah. So for those who are listening on the podcast and don't have the visual for this, Sonja was showing a little silver tube, I guess. It's small, like super small. Like how is that, like an inch or
Less than an inch, more like half an inch or something
yeah,
almost.
it's about half an inch long and it you can fit a rolled up piece of paper inside and attach that to your cat's collar. And on that paper, keep your updated new phone number, address, whatever for while you're traveling. Do you know what those are called?
I forgot.
Okay.
um, yeah, they have a name, but I forgot what it's called.
I'll find out what they're called and I'll make sure to include it in the show
You can
notes
get like
for
whole
this.
packs of them, so
Yeah.
then you have a number ready. So if you're going through a number of countries and have like different phone numbers or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I can think of a lot of practical obligations to that, even without international travel. Like Britt, who's watching with us. Hi, Britt. She said it would be even great just for camping, being able to add your campsite
Mm.
number and things like that for, if you're traveling in a new place with your cat.
Oh yes, yep.
So many little things like new phone number. I just wouldn't have thought of that. An overwhelming theme from everything that I've heard you from a lot of the things at least that you've mentioned tonight is that it's all fairly expensive to travel internationally with a cat. So, do you have any money saving tips for international travel with a cat?
hmm Okay. Oh, actually, before we get into this, very important. Before I forget, the ferry
Mm.
and another general thing I just thought of. So I just like I should go through this because it's important. So I ended up taking the ferry from the UK to Ireland with the car. Now, when I first took it from the UK to Ireland, and I don't know, there are a number of ferries that go there and a number of different routes, and not all of them allow pets, but some do. And the ones that did, when you first went there, it said, so you're only allowed to keep your pet in your car. You can't take it like on, on the deck or
Mhm.
anywhere. And the only other option would be to put your pet in I don't know, they have like those kennels. I don't know what this looks like, but it doesn't sound like a good option for cats.
No.
Um, and I initially thought, okay, great, yeah, it's a familiar environment for him. I can stay there with him. But then turns out, no, you're not allowed to stay in the car.
Wait. So
Yeah,
your cat has to stay in the car, but you are not allowed to stay in the car.
exactly. And it's like
Uh,
this 3-hour trip. And I thought, okay, maybe at least it's still a familiar environment for Percy. It won't be too bad. And I tried to make it comfortable for him. One thing that I didn't consider until I was, on that journey and on the deck above, I realized, you know what, there are car alarms going off all the time. So I don't even want to know what Percy and the other animals they have to go through. I mean,
yeah.
first of all, if you know how to turn the alarm in your car off, do it. But even then, there are probably going to be alarms all around you going off.
Why?
And it must be horrible. Oh, it's just because of the motion. It just sets the alarm off a lot. It's normal.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like, whoa, how are you okay with like putting pets through that? So that's pretty horrible. And Percy at the end of that journey seemed a bit shell shocked. So I think
Well, yeah, I would imagine so. Were you allowed to leave the car on? So at least he has like air conditioner or anything?
no, you can't.
No, see,
It's not that hot there or anything. So
okay,
it's
yeah, so I was gonna say, I guess
yeah.
if you're doing that, make sure the weather's not hot.
No, and I mean you're down there in the ferry in that rump, so it's all dark anyway. Uh
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
so those are like really big ferries where it's like, the cars and this specific thing down there, and then there are many decks above, and yeah.
Okay, okay. See, I have been on a ferry that like takes cars across. I can't even remember where or why I did this, but it was not a long journey, like, 20 minutes or something.
Mm,
And but the cars are just all on top of the deck, like
yeah,
exposed to the sun and all of that. They're not under or in anything.
yeah. I mean, again, even there, it depends which ferry you take, which route, and so many different factors. But
Mm.
yeah, especially the main ones I took, like from the UK to Ireland. This is kind of what it's like, and it's like 3 hours. But the thing is also, so on the journey back, fortunately, I happened to find out that things changed over the 8 months I was in Ireland, and suddenly they had introduced pet-friendly cabins. So you could pre-book a
Oh.
pet-friendly cabin. The only problem is they have clearly not enough of those, because when I tried like to book one a couple of weeks before our planned journey, I could hardly find any, and I just eventually had to sort of like adjust the date just to be able to book a journey where I was able to book a pet-friendly cabin on top of that.
Yeah.
And of course, it's another like, 60, 70 euros or something. But it's so worth it, and it's so much nicer, and you can just be in that cabin with your pet throughout the journey. And
Much
it's
better.
uh so yeah, this is also one of, I think, the things I really also wanted to get across here today is be aware things are changing all the time. So even
Mhm.
all of the things I'm telling you here, don't take it at face value that this is how it is, because within a couple of months they might have changed the rules.
Yeah, and for reference, we are filming this in September of 2023.
Yeah.
So when you're listening, be sure to double check all the information because yeah, a lot of it might have changed by then.
This is also why it's really difficult to find out information about how to do all of those difficult travels, especially to, places like the UK and Ireland.
Mhm.
Because, you try to Google it, and then maybe you find like this helpful blog of someone who did it, but it may be out of date.
Yeah.
And when I first went to the UK, so for flying out of the UK, so there are no specific rules that say a cat can't be in cabin on flights out of the UK. However, when I was flying in like last year, I also checked like flights out, just sort of, to see what to expect. And the only airline that allowed cats in cabin on flights out of the UK was Air Canada, which, by the way, is really expensive on transatlantic flights. So that was the case back then. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to have to pay those like, $2,000+ to go via Canada, because otherwise I have to cross the channel again, and that's extra money and so on.
Yeah.
But then I was trying to book the flight, and then I found out, wait, things changed. There are now like European airlines that allow you to take your cat in cabin on flights out of the UK. But some do and others don't. And finding out that information is hideously difficult. So first of all, I mean, I literally spent hours and hours just looking at all of the different flight routes. And yeah, so there definitely sadly aren't any that go directly from the UK to the US that allow that. So I knew I needed to go via Europe. And then I had to look at all of the different flight routes from the different airports in the UK to the different airports in the US, in Europe that had like connections to Boston. And then looking at every different airlines, looking through the pet policies. And most of them don't have any clear information on this. They tell you, oh, it's not allowed to take cats into the UK in cabin, but they just don't mention anything about taking it out. or they mention a part of it, but not all of it. Like one mentioned,
Oh my god.
like you can't take your cat out of in cabin on flights out of the UK going from Gatwick, but it didn't mention Heathrow, the other London airport. So
My head is spinning. Like, this is all
it
so
is.
ridiculous.
No,
I wish.
you have to then try to contact them. I'm calling them, emailing them, sending them messages via social media, and it takes a lot of time. I spend so much time trying to find out what my options are, and then problem is most of those airlines, they don't even know their own rules. So I ended up with like two potential options. One was via Frankfurt, which isn't great because that's like literally flying in the wrong direction and then having an 8.5 hour flight to Boston. The other one would have been slightly nicer, which would have been to go with TAP Air to Portugal. I could have even done like an extended stay there and then flown across the Atlantic. And the rules weren't quite clear. And I tried calling them, didn't get through, emailed them, didn't get a reply, sent them a message via Facebook, didn't get a reply, called again, eventually talked to someone who I asked this question, and they checked out the rules and told me, no, that's not possible. Like, not out of the UK. Then I booked it the other way via Frankfurt. And a week later, I got a reply to my Facebook message saying, yes, it's possible. You can do this.
I don't even know what to say.
Well, it's a mess. It's really a mess. Like, it seems everyone is like changing the rules now, and not everyone knows what the rules are.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm getting. My takeaway from all of this is that traveling internationally with a pet is super complicated and super expensive, and that the rules are constantly changing, and that even once you're on your trip, you better be checking in on the rules because they might have changed mid-trip.
Pretty much.
Oh my gosh. What a mess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brit says, "My takeaway is that it's all clear as mud." Yeah, I'm with you on that one too.
Pretty much.
That it might even be a generous description. I don't know if there's something less clear than mud, but if there is, that's what we have going on. Let's get back to the money saving tips.
Yes. So in my case, because I was, abroad for a whole year, and I mean, it was a bit different. We weren't traveling the whole time. So ways that I was saving money. So one of the things was, for example, in Ireland. I actually thought Ireland was going to be cheapish, certainly cheaper than the UK or London. I was wrong. It's actually really expensive. Dublin is literally worse than London, especially if you try to find something pet friendly. It's hideous. But what I ended up finding, they have this like rent crisis, and trying to rent something for like 6 months or something is really difficult to find something. But if you happen to be traveling off season, so like not in the tourist season, then you have some good options, because especially in Ireland, they have all those amazing holiday cottages. And over the winter, they're mostly empty. So people are actually renting them out for quite reasonable prices. So that's how Percy and I ended up living in a beautiful cottage in the middle of the countryside in Ireland for 7 months, which was amazing. And another thing was, because then we eventually had to leave this cottage, but I still had to be in Ireland for 1 more month before going back to the UK. And I was just desperate to save some money. And I found there is this website called Workaway, which is like this thing, the old-fashioned roofing where you're like working on like farms or something. Road. It's sort of a similar concept, just you get a variety of jobs. So anything from, working on farms or some DIY stuff to just looking after kids or looking after someone's pets. So basically, it's like free accommodation in exchange for a reasonable amount of work, like usually not too much, but again, it depends on what you find. And there are quite a few of those that actually do allow you to bring your own pet.
Hmm.
That website has like this nice filter where it's like, we'll accept pets or something.
What's the website called?
Workaway.
Workaway. Okay.
Yeah. Just be aware, although also look at like visa issues, because I
Mhm.
turns out even volunteering isn't always allowed in different countries. So again, just make sure you check this out before.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, so I found something with Percy where basically I was just like helping to look after another woman's cat and little dog. So
Hmm.
just like pet sitting. Well, I mean, she was still living there. She was just like away doing work during the day. So it wasn't a lot of work. I mean, and it was nice. And it
Yeah.
was to, introduce Percy to another cat, which didn't go so well, but to another dog, which ended up actually going okay. And it was in a really nice place, and we were able to live there almost for free for a whole month.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, but again, when you do this or anything else, just think of what's possible for your pet. So if you have a pet that, for example, easily gets on with other animals, other dogs, other cats, you have a great variety of options. There are even like house sitting assignments where they accept you to bring your own pet. So, but it depends, because those house sitting assignments are usually pet sitting assignments.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're lucky to have a cat that gets on well with especially dogs, that's definitely an option to look into.
Well, you'd also wanna make sure that the dog is okay with
Oh,
cats.
yes, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
because
I
then you
mean,
run into the
usually
issue.
if they tell you you're allowed to like bring your own pet, then well, depends. Sometimes maybe they were just thinking of a dog, but you can always contact them
Mhm.
and find out what. Just saying, there's maybe options if.
Yeah. Yeah, that's neat. That's interesting.
Then the whole thing with like traveling, the flights and everything, really find out what your options are. That's also so I would have had a few different options to go, like for example, take a flight to France and from there to Boston or something like that.
Mhm.
It would have been a little bit more convenient, but a lot more expensive. Be aware it's going to take a while just to find out what your options are even. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, if you're traveling internationally, it takes a lot of research, a lot of work.
yeah. I mean, you
Yeah.
kind of get better at it over time, but then also things change. So
Yeah.
you have to start
Yeah.
from scratch.
I'm thinking, I mean, with all the things that a cat would have to go through, obviously you wouldn't wanna do something like this unless you absolutely had to and didn't have a choice, but you wouldn't wanna just take your cat on some European vacation as their first trip, right? Because there are so
Yeah,
many aspects of this travel with the planes and the taxis and all of the things that you probably wanna start smaller first and make sure that
exactly.
your cat is comfortable with travel, comfortable with new places, and all the, chaos that comes with travel. So practice small before you go big.
This is exactly one of the reasons why that year before I did some travel with Percy through the US as a kind of, practice and preparation for the bigger travels that I knew would be coming up at some point.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I think there are so many training things that you could do to help prep, carrier training, car training. You can't really train for plane rides without doing it, but
Mhm.
most of the other things you can, and you could even desensitize your cat to maybe car alarm sounds ahead of time. If you know that is something that you might encounter on a ferry. Um, so yeah, practice all of the things before you do it. Because if you
Mhm.
just decide, oh, I'm going to go on a European vacation and bring my cat, and they've never traveled before, it's probably not going to go so well.
Unless you happen to have a really chill cat, some
Yeah.
cats, but yeah, don't don't just do it for fun. And if then, if you're going to Europe, that's still a more straightforward kind of thing to do than planning to go to. the UK or Ireland. The one other place that doesn't allow any animals at all is Iceland. Uh, but yeah, other than that, most European countries, it's fairly easy to bring your pet there. Although, of course, if you're traveling from the US, it's still a big, long journey, but at least it's a bit
Yeah.
more straightforward than getting to one of those island countries.
Yeah. Golly. Well, Sonja, this has been really eye-opening. I knew international travel would be involved and complicated, but I have to say that it's more than I thought.
It was a
Yeah.
lot.
I enjoyed seeing all of your posts on Instagram when you and Percy were on this trip. I remember the little Ireland cottage that you stayed in, and it was so picturesque and amazing. So, if people want to check out your travels and see what you and Percy are up to, both going forward and, see more of your European vacation, where can they find you?
So we're on Instagram. It's at Percy the Explorer Cat. And all of the posts in which I was specifically writing about our journey, almost like a blog post, even though it's on Instagram. So I put the hashtag Percy's Big Journey. So if you put that in, you can sort of follow our parts. And if you're looking at it now, I haven't even finished posting about it. I'm still like about a month and a half behind because, especially the last few weeks coming back to the US, it's just been too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you had some really amazing pictures, so I definitely recommend everybody go check out Percy's Big Journey on Instagram and see his amazing world travels and be jealous. I know I was, although I don't think I'll ever do it because that's too much.
If you do end up doing it, I mean, the one good thing is, you get to a lot of really exciting places and, like Airbnb or so, if you really put the time in to find nice accommodations, you can find some amazing places. And I mean, Percy really enjoyed almost every place we've been to, and they were great for him to explore. So I always try to find quieter places where I know I can take him outside and he's going to be comfortable.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you enjoying the Kitty Cat Go Adventure podcast? Let me know by leaving a review. This will help others to find it and hopefully be inspired to get out there, try new things, and go new places with their cat. What questions do you have about adventuring with cats? Or maybe you'd just like to chat with me about what you learned in this episode. Find me on Instagram at kittycatgoadventures. You can also screenshot this episode and tag me in your stories so I can see who is listening. I'd love to continue the conversation with you, so find me on Instagram or join our Facebook group, Kitty Cat Go Adventure Team, so you can connect with a whole community of fellow cat adventurers. And as always, you can find the show notes, including all links and resources discussed in this episode at kittycatgo.com/podcast. Until next time, happy adventuring.